Hello, it's Pet, and I'm back with another video. As you notice, Cebu's not here. She's gonna be away for a couple of days, so I'm gonna be here holding the fort for the next few days. So if you want to see more of me, just like the content and let me know down in the comments. So in this video, I'm gonna be discussing a very interesting clip that I saw on Twitter over the weekend, where famous SABC News anchor Leanne was interviewing Zimbabwean businessman and activist Rutendo. Let's just check out this clip first, and then we'll discuss it.
In fact, why don't you take up the opportunity? Why would you come and make your fortune here in South Africa when, as you've described it, you could be making a fortune in Zimbabwe? Why are you here?
Because I'm part of the problem in Zimbabwe. My attitude of thinking that I had to come and take up the opportunity that was offered to me here,
so why don't you go
instead
home?
of mining
May
land.
I ask you that? Why do you not
I am
go
going
home?
home. But right now, I've also got family in South Africa. I've got South African children, and those South African children don't just allow me to just stand up and leave, but I do have projects that I'm taking part in Zimbabwe because I've learned that those resources are the most important thing.
If you have such faith in your country, in Zimbabwe, I would say and I would think you would get up and you would take your family and you would go and fix up the future of Zimbabwe. If you're saying there's land, if you're saying there's minerals, if you're saying there is so much wealth and opportunities for you there, you're living a contradiction.
No, I'm not living a contradiction.
You certainly are. By sitting here, you're living a contradiction.
Because
people are suffering in Zimbabwe.
So why are people not
languishing
why
here?
are people not going to the Netherlands? Why are Germans not going back to Germany? Is it because their countries are bad? Is it because they're running away from problems in the UK or in the States? Why aren't Europeans going? What are you doing here?
I live here. This is my home. I'm not running away from it.
But why are you living here instead of Europe? Why did your great-grandparents come here instead of Europe?
We're not talking about grandparents. We're talking about me.
No,
we're talking about you.
You've made it sound like a Zimbabwean needs to go back to Zimbabwe to show that Zimbabwe is working. So why are Europeans not going back to Europe? Why are Asians not going back to Asia? Why are they staying in South Africa?
The context of the conversation is that you're saying that Zimbabwe is a beautiful country with great opportunities and people have run away from there to become waiters. The context is you are living here in South Africa when you could be going back and making that country work. That's the context.
You also forgot that I was asked to come here. Somebody thought my skills were important here.
I've been asked to go to other countries, but I believe in this country.
But why don't you believe in Europe?
No, I believe in South Africa.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
I believe in my country.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
This is not about...
So that's a very interesting interaction there. And I'm just gonna spend this whole video breaking down this whole interaction and give my opinion and thoughts on it. In my opinion, Rutendo lost this initial debate with Leanne for a couple of reasons, which I'll get into now in this video. Just for context, Rutendo, I wasn't aware of him until he had a sit down with Penwell and on Penwell's platform, and that's when he gained more visibility in South Africa, and that's when I started hearing about Rutendo and his activism work and all the stuff that he's been doing. So in this interview here, Leanne is questioning why, since Zimbabwe is such a great country, why isn't he in Zimbabwe right now? And it's a very good question. And the thing to keep in mind here is that this isn't the first time Rutendo's asked this question. He's been asked this probably thousands of times. And even after the 1000th time, it doesn't seem like he has a clear answer to that question. Because it seems like what he's saying and what is being asked and the answer that he will give will be a contradiction to what he's saying. So Rutendo does a couple of things to deflect this question. So the most useful tactic that he uses is goalpost shifting, where he shifts the goalpost. So for example, in an interview back in 2019, Rutendo was asked the same question: why are Zimbabweans coming to South Africa?
Go back home, but there's a clip that we played. There's another Zimbabwean who says if there's any South African who wants any Zimbabwean to go back home, they should go there themselves. People don't want to go back home. Things are not changing there.
There's a number of issues. So first of all, I said that the sanctions are actually a condition of war, and conditions of war, or at least war, causes refugees. So that's one issue. The other issue is us as Zimbabweans, by our education, have become people that want to be slaves rather than people that want to self-determine. We've got land, gold, resources in the country, but the Zimbabwean would rather take a CV and give it to a white man to give him a job rather than for him to be able to work the land himself and dig the resources himself to build the country for himself. That's why I'm one of those people that made that mistake. My friends who stayed in Zimbabwe are millionaires today. I'm not a millionaire because I decided the CV route. That is one of the major reasons why people are in South Africa. It's the refugee situation, but also not wanting to self-determine.
5 years later, 2024, he's asked the same question again. And now he's shifted the goalpost from the refugee and sanctions status to now using a different anchor, which is anchoring him here in South Africa. So in 2019, he says that, no, I'm a refugee, the sanctions, and we don't want to self-actualize. Now in 2024, now that there are no sanctions, now he's shifted the goalpost and he's anchoring himself to South Africa using his children. His children are born in South Africa, so he calls them South African children. So he says, no, my South African children are here, but that makes it difficult for him to just up and leave. But he's planning to go back. So you see how he shifted the goalpost initially from his initial premise as to know it was refugee status, but now he's using a different anchor, his children. For a lot of people, that would be a satisfactory answer, but because Leanne is a seasoned journalist, she kept probing. That wasn't a satisfactory answer for her. She wanted to know more because she believes that's not a good enough reason as to why he's still in South Africa. So she kept probing and asked again, if you believe that Zimbabwe is a great country, why don't you take your kids, take your family, go to Zimbabwe and start a life there? And then that's when he shifts the goalpost again. So when somebody starts losing in an argument, there's a couple of things that you will start to see. The less intelligent people will start name calling. They'll start yelling. They'll start throwing tantrums, and they'll start emotionally charging the discussion. That's what you tend to see when somebody starts losing an argument. They get emotional. They start name calling. They start, insulting and stuff like that. And then the more intelligent people, they tend to again shift the goalpost. So what somebody does in a debate, if they lose in the debate, they will ask you the same question back. So let's say I ask you a question to say, why aren't you working today? And because you don't have a valid reason or you don't have a valid answer, you ask the same question back. Well, why aren't you working today? You're here with me. That's another tactic that people use to try and deflect the question back, or deflect it another way and stopping the person from answering the question. So Rutendo uses this tactic here again. He asks Leanne, why aren't Europeans going back to Europe? Which again, it's not the same thing, because one, there's a contradiction there, which I'm gonna try explain. So one, Rutendo he anchors himself to South Africa using his children. His children are born in South Africa, so he cannot leave because he can't just take his children and move to Zimbabwe because they are born in South Africa. He's asking a person born in South Africa, why doesn't she go back to Europe? That already is a contradiction, because he can anchor himself using his South African born children, but now he's asking her, why doesn't she go back to Europe? So she cannot anchor herself using her status of being born in South Africa. So that's the first contradiction that Rutendo tends to get wrong, and that's why it's not the same thing that he's asking her. The second thing is that why him asking her is not correct. But again, she does a good job by she recontextualizes the initial premise again and tells him, no, I am asking you this, why don't you go back? Because you said there's a lot of land, there's a lot of wealth, there's a lot of opportunities. So knowing that premise, why do you choose to stay in South Africa? She recontextualizes it again because he tried to shift the goalpost. So again, he re-asks her the same question as the one that she asked him, trying to flip it back onto her because he doesn't want to answer the question.
Why aren't Europeans going? What are you doing here?
I live here. This is my home. I'm not running away
But
from
why
it.
Why are you living here instead of
There's
Europe?
great
Why did your
opportunities, and I
great-grandparents
love
come
this
here instead
country.
of Europe?
We're not talking about grandparents. We're talking about me.
No,
We're talking about
you've
you.
made it sound like a Zimbabwean needs to go back to
No,
Zimbabwe
no,
to
no,
show
no,
that
no.
Zimbabwe is working.
We-
So why are Europeans not going back to
context-
Europe? Why are Asians not going back to Asia? Why are they
The
staying in South
context
Africa?
of the conversation is that you're saying that Zimbabwe is a beautiful country with great opportunities and people have run away from there to become waiters. The context is you are living here in South Africa when you could be going back and making that country work. That's the
But you also
context.
forgot
But
that you also forgot that I was asked to come here. Somebody thought my skills were important here.
I've been
and I
asked to
was
go
asked
to other countries, but I believe in this
But the
country. and I
fear-
refuse
But
to
why
go.
don't you believe in Europe?
No, I believe in South Africa.
Why don't you believe in Europe?
I believe in my country.
Why don't you believe in
is-
Europe?
This is not
it-
about.
And then he also makes it, he also insinuates it as a race thing now, because instead of saying why aren't people going back to their countries, he's saying why aren't Europeans going back to Europe, which is playing that race card in there. But because Leanne is sure about herself and she knows who she is, she reiterates that no, she is South African and this is her country. She's not the one walking around saying that Europe is a great place with great opportunities, but she chooses to stay in South Africa. She's not the one doing that. Rutendo is. Rutendo is the one busy saying that Zimbabwe is a great place with a lot of opportunities, but he's staying in South Africa. And it's not even a country that's far away, it's a neighboring country. He's staying in a neighboring country, but his own country, where he says there's many opportunities, a lot of land and wealth and stuff like that, he chooses to stay in a neighboring country. It just doesn't make logical sense. Any logical person, right, any logical person thinking about this situation would just think, first of all, a lot of people would love to be in their home country. A lot of people would actually prefer being in their home country over another country for cultural reasons and other aspects, but it's just much easier to be around the people you grew up around. And then secondly, why would you choose to be in another country when your country is giving you the same opportunities or better opportunities than the country that you are staying in right now? Why would you choose to do that? It just does not make a lot of sense. So this is what annoys South Africans a lot about this whole debate with Zimbabwe, when Zimbabweans tell them that no, in Zimbabwe there's land, people are landowners, people have wealth, people have a lot of opportunities, but you still have millions of Zimbabweans migrating to South Africa. That just doesn't make sense. There's no logical conclusion to that people are leaving their home country, which is supposedly a great place with a lot of people who are landowners. That's another thing that Zimbabweans like to tell South Africans, that no, at least Zimbabweans are landowners. They own their land, instead of South Africans where the majority does not own their land, but the minority does. But South Africans rebuttal with that again. Then why are Zimbabweans coming to South Africa? That's the main rebuttal. If everything is great over there, you have no reason to come to South Africa, but you choose to do so anyway. So what you're saying and what you're doing is not aligning. It's conflicting because it doesn't make sense. So Leanne, being a great journalist that she is, she reiterates, she understands that no, he's shifting the goalpost. So she reframes the argument. She asked him again, and then after she asked, he shifts the goalpost again, asking her to know, why aren't you going back to Europe? And she states that no, I am South African. This is my country. I grew up here, and I love this country. So, what's your excuse for not being in Zimbabwe right now? What's your excuse? Your children? You can just take your children. Your children are not anchoring you here. They're not. So you don't have a valid reason why you're here, because what you're saying is false. Zimbabwe is not as great as what you're saying it is. Because if it was, you wouldn't be in South Africa. So that's why people have a lot of South Africans are a bit annoyed by Zimbabweans, because Zimbabweans are painting this false narrative that no, Zimbabwe is great. Most of the people there are landowners. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of wealth and stuff like that. But people are choosing to migrate to South Africa to become waiters, to become minimum wage workers. Like, does that make sense in your head if you think about it? So finally, just to end off this whole clip here, the brother sitting right next to Rutendo actually tells the truth. He tells the truth right next to Rutendo as to why Rutendo is in South Africa and why many Zimbabweans are in South Africa.
And he was a non-apologetic leader who's left a great legacy behind. What are your views on this?
What great legacy has Mugabe left? Mugabe is a remorseless tyrant. He destroyed a country. Why is Rutendo here? Why am I here? We are here because our country has nothing to offer us. Why are millions of Zimbabweans here? I just heard him say, why are Europeans in wherever they are? I missed what he said. We are here because, not out of choice, but because of circumstances. We have to make a living. We can't make a living in our own country.
So the gentleman sitting next to Rutendo, I don't know his name unfortunately, but he actually tells the truth of the state of Zimbabwe as to why millions of Zimbabweans are migrating to South Africa. Right next to Rutendo, and Rutendo didn't say anything about that, even though it directly contradicts what he was saying, that Zimbabwe is a great nation with a lot of opportunities. It directly contradicts what he just said. But the gentleman next to him told the actual truth. That makes more logical sense as to why millions of Zimbabweans are migrating to South Africa. So Rutendo got caught out in this interview as one, being a liar, and two, his debating tactics. You can see it in plain sight that he likes to shift the goalpost a lot, especially if he cannot answer a question that's presented to him. And you know what the funny thing is about this whole thing? Rutendo has asked this question probably thousands of times, but he still cannot even conjure up a reasonable or valid answer to that question, even after years of being asked this. And it's tough. It's probably tough on him because it's very difficult to be constantly told to go back to your country, but you cannot go back to your country. But you have to give up this false facade that your country is great, your country is doing well. You have to give up this facade that it's doing well, but you cannot personally go back to your country. So you are living a contradiction. It must be very tough on him. And that's this conversation said a lot. It said a lot about what South Africans be thinking when Zimbabweans tell South Africans that we are here doing you a favor, we are providing services, we're providing skills, we are highly educated people, we are bringing these skills and this education to your country, and we are building up your country. And again, Leanne represented the South African asking, okay, since you're highly educated and since you're highly skilled, why don't you go build your country? Your country is in shambles right now. Why don't you just go back, use those skills, use your education, and build your country? Why don't you do that? And Zimbabweans generally do not have an answer for that. But the truthful and more honest Zimbabweans, like the gentleman next to Rutendo, will tell you straight up that no, we also want to make a living. And it's very difficult to do that in Zimbabwe. So that's why we are here in South Africa. It's not by choice. The circumstance is very bad. And you can respect those people who are more honest than those who are trying to, I don't know, brag to South Africans that they are more educated than them, they are more skilled. But you cannot build your country. You're actually running away from your problems. That's why there's also a lot of like this animosity to Zimbabweans, that Zimbabweans are looked at as like cowards, because with all the education, with all the skills that they have, that they tend to brag about, and even they brag about the land to try and belittle South Africans. They brag about land to try and belittle South Africans, saying that they have land while South Africans do not. With all of that, y'all still choose to come and live in South Africa. Whatever conditions South Africa provides for you, you'll still choose that over living in your own country. So what does that say about you as a people? What does that say about your country? That you're not even willing to fix your own country. So yeah, that's the whole breakdown of this whole conversation. if you guys enjoyed that whole breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think. I'll check you in the next one.
There's a clip that we played. There's another Zimbabwean who says if there's any South African who wants any Zimbabwean to go back home, they should go there themselves. People don't want to go back home.